My fiancée slept with my cousin while I was planning our wedding, so I canceled everything and left her life forever. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I thought my fiancée Vanessa and I were perfect for each other. From the moment we met at a mutual friend's rooftop party, I felt like I'd stumbled into something I didn't even dare dream existed. Vanessa had this way of laughing that made the entire room stop, like time itself paused to watch her. We clicked instantly. Same humor, same taste in music, same obsession with quiet Sunday mornings and spontaneous road trips. It wasn't long before friends and family noticed. Everyone said we were meant to be, the kind of couple people either envied or quietly wished they were. I believed every word, and for once, I felt like I didn't have to carry the weight of my life alone. When she said yes to the engagement, I was on cloud 9. We spent hours poring over wedding venues, tasting cakes that were too sweet, and scribbling guest lists that seemed endless. I wanted it all to be perfect, not for anyone else, but for her. We dreamed of a honeymoon somewhere, remote, a place where it was just us, no phones, no emails, no distractions, just the kind of romantic escape you only see in movies. Every plan we made felt like cementing our future together, like laying down the foundation of a life we'd both worked so hard to deserve. I've always been the type to plan ahead, to work hard, and to provide. I've spent late nights at the office, weekends juggling extra gigs, all so that I could feel secure and confident that I could give Vanessa the life she deserved. And she noticed. She'd smile and say things like, "I just want people to admire us. I want them to see how successful we are." And I'd nod, assuming she meant the excitement of our future together. There was a tiny pang sometimes, a whisper in the back of my mind that maybe she cared more about appearances than us. But I shook it off that night, as I closed my laptop after confirming the engagement party booking. I sat back in my chair and smiled. This was it. Everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of, was finally coming together. Our love, our future, our perfect life. I had no idea that the world I was so carefully building was about to be shattered, one secret at a time. After the initial excitement of the engagement wore off, I started noticing little things, teeny cracks that I desperately tried to ignore. Vanessa had always been a social butterfly, but now she seemed different. Late nights at work suddenly turned into unexplained errands, and her phone seemed glued to her hand. I'd catch her glancing at it with a strange intensity, a smile I couldn't read. I asked her once, casually, "Everything okay? You've been on your phone a lot lately," and she just waved me off, saying, "It's nothing, just work stuff." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her completely, because, to me, she was flawless. Planning the engagement party and wedding became my full-time obsession. Every weekend was filled with tastings, flower arrangements, and guest lists. Vanessa seemed invested, at least on the surface, but I started noticing subtle shifts in her attitude. She'd critique my choices more than before, question every detail, and occasionally sigh when I showed her new ideas. One afternoon, as we were looking at centerpieces, she casually mentioned, "I just want everyone to really see how amazing we are together." It should have been cute, but something about the way she said it felt hollow. I brushed it off, blaming wedding stress or her excitement to impress her friends. Even our friends started dropping comments that made my stomach twist. "Vanessa seems a bit distant," one of my buddies said during a casual dinner. I forced a laugh and said, "She's just busy with work, that's all." But the doubt started to creep in. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about how far we'd come and how much I had invested, not just financially. I had poured my heart into this relationship, and every time I noticed something off, I told myself I was imagining it. Still, I told myself I was lucky. She was beautiful, ambitious, and she loved me, or at least, that's what I thought. I didn't want to ruin the perfect picture I had built in my mind, but deep down, a tiny knot of unease had formed in my chest, and I couldn't shake it. Something about the way she talked, laughed, and even looked at me felt different, like a page of our story had already been torn. And I had no idea that what was about to happen would turn that unease into absolute devastation. Family gatherings had always been a big part of my life, and now they felt heavier than ever. My cousin Ethan had always been close to me. We grew up celebrating birthdays together, sharing vacations, and swapping secrets. He was charming, funny, and everyone seemed to love him. But lately, something about the way Vanessa interacted with him started to bother me. It wasn't blatant, nothing obvious, but there were these little moments, lingering laughs, quick glances, inside jokes that I couldn't explain. I caught myself feeling a strange mix of suspicion and discomfort. Emotions I hated admitting, even to myself. One weekend, my parents hosted a casual barbecue, and I watched from the porch as Vanessa and Ethan disappeared for a few minutes to check the grill together. When they came back, Vanessa was smiling a little too brightly, and Ethan's eyes had this glint that didn't sit right with me. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, Ethan was my cousin, Vanessa was my fiancée, and I didn't want to see shadows where there were none. Still, that uneasy feeling refused to leave. Later, I confided in a close friend, nervously laughing it off. "Maybe I'm imagining things," I said, twisting my wedding ring around my finger. "She's just friendly, and Ethan's always been him." But my friend gave me a look I couldn't read. "Just trust your gut, man," he said quietly, and I felt a chill. That was the first time I realized my gut was screaming at me, and I had been too blind to listen. Even at home, the tension was subtle but pervasive. Vanessa would flinch at certain questions, dodge conversations, or suddenly change topics when Ethan was mentioned. I found myself replaying past moments in my head, wondering if I had missed something obvious. Every laugh, every shared look between them became a puzzle piece I didn't want to put together. And yet, I was trapped in the denial that had protected me for so long, clinging to the illusion that our love was untouchable by the end of that week. I couldn't stop thinking about them alone, together, smiling. It was like a quiet whisper at the back of my mind, persistent and unwelcome. I had no idea that this unease, which I had been brushing off, was the first thread pulling at the fabric of everything I believed about Venice and everything I thought I knew about loyalty, trust, and family. By now, wedding planning had become almost all-consuming. Every evening after work, I found myself buried in spreadsheets, vendor emails, and guest lists. I wanted everything to be perfect for Vanessa, not because anyone would judge us, but because I loved her and wanted this to be the happiest time of our lives. But with every detail I checked off, I started noticing her impatience creeping in. She'd roll her eyes when I suggested a cake flavor, sigh when I questioned seating arrangements, or snap at me over something minor. "You're stressing too much," she'd say, but the tone didn't match the words. It felt like criticism dressed up as concern, and it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Even small errands became battlegrounds. I remember driving her to a florist and pointing out a centerpiece idea I thought was charming. She barely glanced at it and muttered, "Are you seriously spending hours on this? People aren't going to notice." I laughed it off, telling myself she was just overwhelmed, that planning a wedding was stressful, and that maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, a tiny spark of unease was growing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something about her mood had shifted, that the Vanessa I knew, the one who lit up every room, was slowly fading at night. I'd lie awake listening to the city hum outside my window, replaying our interactions and analyzing every word and glance. She seemed physically present, but mentally, somewhere else. There were moments where her smile felt forced, her laughter hollow. I started questioning myself. Was I imagining tension where there wasn't any? Was I being too controlling, too overprotective? The more I questioned, the more anxious I became. Even friends began noticing subtle changes. One of my coworkers jokingly said, "Vanessa seems different lately. You okay?" I laughed nervously and nodded, pretending all was normal. But that question stayed with me long after, and as I closed my laptop that night, exhausted and restless, I couldn't help but feel that the perfect life I was building was starting to wobble, that the foundation I thought was solid might already be cracking. Something was off, and I had no idea just how far the cracks went or how much they were about to crumble under my feet. I should have seen it sooner, but I didn't. One evening, I was helping Vanessa set up the guest list for the engagement party when her phone buzzed on the counter. She stepped away, and curiosity got the better of my no. It's wrong, but my gut was gnawing at me. I glanced at the screen and froze. There it was, a string of messages between her and Ethan, my cousin. At first, they seemed innocent enough flirty jokes, teasing remarks, but as I scrolled, the undertone became unmistakable. Heart racing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was reading too much into harmless texting. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. I confronted her gently, my voice shaky. "Hey, who's Ethan texting like that?" I tried to keep calm, but my hands were shaking. She laughed it off, brushing past me with that familiar, dismissive charm. "It's nothing, just a joke between cousins." "You're overthinking it." I wanted to believe her, so desperately. I really did. I reminded myself of the love we'd shared, the plans we'd made, the life I thought we were building. But the knot in my chest refused to untangle. Later that night, lying in bed, I replayed every interaction, every glance, every lingering smile I'd seen between them. Was it all innocent? Or had I been blind? I felt betrayed even without proof. Sleep didn't come, just a relentless churn of doubt and anxiety. My mind kept circling, trying to catch something I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. Even the wedding planning, which had once been a joy, became unbearable. Every time I pictured Vanessa walking down the aisle, that gnawing suspicion crept in. I knew something was wrong, and the realization hit me harder than any argument or fight could have. The people I trusted most, my fiancé, my cousin, might already be betraying me, and I had no idea that my worst fears were only just beginning to unfold. I never imagined I'd catch them like that, but I did. One Saturday, I returned home early from work, thinking I'd surprise Vanessa with lunch. The moment I stepped in, I froze. There they were, Vanessa and Ethan, laughing on the couch, in a way that no innocent cousin and fiancé should. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur, my stomach drop. Everything I had believed, every trust I had placed in them, shattered in an instant. I wanted to scream, to run, to demand answers, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, silent, listening to the proof I never wanted. Vanessa looked up, and for a moment, her smile faltered, but then she recovered, like nothing had happened. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her voice light, almost casual. I wanted to believe the tone, to convince myself it was a misunderstanding, but the look in Ethan's eyes and the intimacy of their closeness told me otherwise. My entire world, the perfect life I thought I was building, collapsed in that one terrifying heartbeat. I wanted to feel anger, but all I could feel was hollow betrayal. I confronted them immediately, my voice shaking more than I expected. "What the hell is going on here? How could you?" Vanessa stammered, trying to explain, but every word sounded like lies wrapping themselves around my chest. Ethan barely looked guilty, like he had been waiting for me to see, to react. The disbelief, the humiliation, the heartbreak high, couldn't breathe. I had spent months planning a future with her, investing everything, my time, my money, my trust, and it was all crumbling in front of me. I locked myself in my bedroom afterward, staring at the ceiling, shaking, tears streaming down my face. My phone buzzed with messages from friends asking how the party plans were coming along. Completely oblivious to the disaster that had just unfolded in my life, I felt utterly alone, crushed and unmoored. That was the moment I realized nothing would ever be the same again, and in that quiet, broken silence, I began to wonder if I could ever forgive her, even face the two people who had destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and loyalty. I couldn't stay silent any longer. That night, I confronted Vanessa, my voice barely holding together. "How could you do this with him?" "While we were planning our wedding," I asked, every word trembling with anger and disbelief. She looked at me, her eyes wide, almost guilty, but not enough. "It just happened," she whispered, like it was some small, careless mistake. I wanted to believe it was a one-time thing, a moment of weakness, but my gut screamed that this was far deeper than she was admitting. Then I turned to Ethan, who was sitting there like nothing was wrong, that smug look on his face. "And you? My own cousin?" I could feel my blood boiling. "You knew what she meant to me. How could you betray me like this?" He shrugged, like he didn't owe me anything, like my heartbreak was just collateral damage. I felt the walls of my life collapsing. My family, my fiancé, my closest relative, all, the people I thought I could trust, had stabbed me in the back at the same time. I tried to process it, tried to make sense of how someone I loved so deeply could hurt me this way. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice breaking. "Everything. And this is how you repay me." Vanessa looked down, tears in her eyes, but I couldn't hear it, couldn't feel her remorse. All I could feel was betrayal so sharp it cut straight through my chest. Every plan I had made, every dream I had nurtured, was gone. That night, I left the apartment and walked aimlessly through the city streets. The cool air hit my face, but it didn't soothe me. I felt hollow, humiliated, angry, and heartbroken all at once. The city lights blurred through my tears, and I realized, with a sinking certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. I had loved them, trusted them, and they had destroyed me in the cruelest way possible. And yet, as much as I wanted to lash out, a tiny cold thought settled in my mind. Maybe the only thing left to do was remove myself completely from both of their lives. That night, I felt completely broken. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and every corner of my apartment reminded me of what I had lost. Vanessa's laugh echoed in my mind. Ethan's smug face burned into my memory, and I kept replaying every moment I had trusted them blindly. I felt humiliated, like a fool who had been blind to the truth all along. Friends called, asking about wedding plans, but I couldn't respond. How could I explain that the people I loved most had betrayed me in the most intimate way imaginable? I wandered aimlessly through the city, feeling the cold bite of the night air on my skin, and yet it didn't pierce the numbness I carried inside. Every streetlight, every passing car seemed to mock me, reminding me that life was continuing around me while mine felt shattered. I kept imagining what I should do, yell, fight, beg, but none of it mattered. Their betrayal was a wound that no confrontation could heal. I realized with a painful clarity that the wedding, the life I had been building, the future I had imagined it, was all gone. Back at my apartment, I stared at our engagement photos on the wall. The smiles captured there felt like lies now, frozen moments mocking me for believing in them. My hands shook as I touched the frames, trying to grasp at the happiness that had been ripped away. I felt small, powerless, and humiliated. The weight of their actions pressed down on me, and I couldn't see a way out of the mess they had created. In that darkness, a single thought emerged. Cold and precise, maybe the only way I could reclaim myself was to walk away completely. Not just from Vanessa, not just from Ethan, but from the entire world they had tainted with their betrayal. And for the first time, I understood that no matter how much it hurt, some people didn't deserve a place in my life at all. But leaving them wouldn't be easy, and the path ahead was terrifyingly uncertain. The next morning, I made a decision I knew would change everything. I was done. I couldn't stay in that apartment, in that life, surrounded by reminders of betrayal. I called every vendor, every planner, every caterer, and canceled the wedding. I told myself it wasn't just about Vanessa and Ethan, it was about me, about reclaiming the dignity they had tried to steal. Each call I made felt like a small victory, like I was clawing back control over a life that had been hijacked by deceit. I changed my locks, removed Vanessa's belongings, and erased her digital presence from my life. Every text, every photo, every message from her and Ethan vanished from my phone. It was painful, but also necessary. For weeks, I avoided friends who were still close to them, deleted social media connections, and refused invitations where I might see their faces. I had to remove the toxicity entirely to breathe again. The hardest part was the silence. I kept expecting to hear her laugh or his voice in the apartment, in the streets, even in my dreams. But gradually, the emptiness became a relief. I realized I was no longer waiting for apologies, explanations, or confessions. I was simply existing for myself. It was terrifying at first. This freedom came with uncertainty, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of clarity. I knew that healing wouldn't be instant, that scars would remain, and memories would sting. But the act of walking away, of shutting the door on their world, gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: power. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the one writing the rules, reclaiming my life one deliberate step at a time. And even though the future was uncertain for the first time, I felt a spark of hope that maybe, eventually, I could be happy again without them. I didn't want petty revenge, but I wanted them to feel the consequences of what they had done. So I started carefully, quietly reclaiming everything they had tried to take from me. I made sure vendors knew about the cancellations in advance, handled the refunds professionally, and subtly reminded everyone who was involved that the wedding was off not because of me, but because of their dishonesty. It was satisfying in a small, almost surgical way. Every acknowledgement of their mistake, every murmur of surprise from friends and family, felt like validation. Vanessa tried calling, texting, even leaving messages at my apartment. I didn't respond. Ethan reached out too, smirking at first, Then, nervously, when I didn't react, I realized that ignoring them was far more powerful than any shouting match or confrontation. Their guilt, embarrassment, and exposure were already doing what I couldn't say with words. For once, I was the one holding all the cards, and it felt intoxicating. I also started reclaiming my own narrative. Friends who had doubted or overlooked the situation began to see me in a new light. "I can't believe they did that to you," one friend said, shaking his head. I nodded, letting them recognize the betrayal, while I quietly observed the shift. The balance had turned. Where once I felt powerless, I now felt strong. My life, my future, my dignity. They were mine again, untarnished by the selfish actions of two people who had once meant everything to me. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about restoring myself. Each step I took, each boundary I enforced, each reminder I made to the people who mattered that I was no longer a victim, fortified my sense of self. I was no longer defined by their mistakes or my heartbreak. For the first time in months, I felt alive, confident, and untouchable. And while I still carried the sting of betrayal, I knew something profound. I had taken back my power, and nothing they did could ever take it away again. With Vanessa and Ethan completely out of my life, I finally had the space to breathe. The first few weeks were strange quiet, almost painfully so, but gradually, I started rebuilding my routine. I focused on work, friends, and hobbies I had abandoned while planning a life that no longer existed. The freedom was disorienting at first, but also exhilarating. I realized I hadn't just survived betrayal. I had reclaimed my own existence. I began reflecting on everything I had learned through the heartbreak. Trust, I realized, was a gift, not something to hand over blindly. Boundaries weren't optional. They were essential. And self-respect wasn't negotiable, no matter how much I loved someone. Each day I felt a little lighter, a little stronger, and a little more certain that I could create a life that didn't depend on anyone else's integrity. Friends and family noticed the change too. They complimented me on my calm, collected demeanor, the quiet confidence I now carried. For the first time, I could truly talk about what happened without tears or trembling. I shared enough to release the weight of betrayal, but not so much that it defined me. I was moving forward, not backward, and that distinction felt powerful. Even in the stillness of my apartment at night, I didn't feel haunted anymore. Memories of Vanessa and Ethan lingered, yes, but they were distant and impotent, like old news I had outgrown. I began dreaming again small things at first, weekend trips, new projects, personal goals, but they felt real because they were mine. Slowly, life began to feel like a canvas, empty and waiting for me to paint something beautiful, something that no one could ruin. And in those quiet, reflective moments, I realized something profound. The world had not ended because of their betrayal. My life hadn't crumbled. In fact, it was just beginning. Months had passed, and for the first time, I could truly say I was free. Free from betrayal, free from doubt, and free from the constant ache of trust broken. The apartment felt like mine again, each corner a reminder that I had survived, that I had chosen myself when everyone else had failed. I looked at the life I had rebuilt, small victories, quiet accomplishments, and the simple joy of waking up without dread, and I finally felt peace. Not hollow peace, but the kind that comes from knowing you refuse to be anyone's victim. I started setting new goals, ones that had nothing to do with anyone else. Trips I wanted to take, career moves I had postponed, even friendships I had ignored during the engagement chaos. I savored every decision, every small freedom, like a taste of life I hadn't known I could have. And when I thought of Vanessa and Ethan, I didn't feel anger or longing. I felt clarity. Their chapter had ended, and mine was just beginning, filled with possibilities they could never touch. Even encounters with mutual friends no longer caused panic. I had built a protective wall, not from fear, but from sound. If they spoke of the past, I could smile politely and move on, because the betrayal no longer defined me. I had rewritten my story, one boundary, one deliberate choice at a time, until I was unrecognizable to the person I had been, the hurt, desperate, trusting version of myself. And in that final reflection, I understood the true power of walking away. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was liberation. I had survived the worst, reclaimed my life, and emerged stronger than I ever imagined. Looking back, I realized that losing them had been the greatest gift of all, the chance to find myself, whole and untouchable, and to build a future where no one could betray the person I had become.